friends, this is Marilyn from tarotclarity.com, and today I thought I would try to do a video challenge myself. In the past several years, I've participated in a few video challenges when I'm aware of them, and they're fun, and I thought maybe I'd try my hand at them as well. Sometimes when I am tagged in a video response and I try, I'll think to myself, I'd like to see this question. And then I thought to myself, well, why don't I just do it myself? So I'll probably tag Masha and I'll probably tag Thesar because they're the only two tarot people that I'm really aware of. I may have mentioned this in previous videos. I kind of stay in my own lane. I don't really look at other tarot channels. It's just not something I do. And I don't necessarily just watch their channel, either. But when I'm aware that I've been tagged, I always check it out. Or if I see that they dropped a video that seems to be interesting to me, then I'll watch it, of course. But I don't go out of my way to watch what other tarot people are doing because I just kind of mind my own business, and do my own thing. But I do like the idea of a tarot challenge, and so here we go. Now, I'm going to mention the questions first, and then I'll walk you through my answers. One thing that I do want to mention is that this is not going to be a video challenge where you have to have beautiful or exotic decks to respond, because a lot of my questions aren't about that. And tarot shouldn't just be about the most beautiful decks or expensive decks or whatever kind of glorious decks you have in your collection, right? You could make tarot work with a cheap mass-produced deck, that you just have a affinity for. In fact, most of my grabbing, decks that I grab are mass-produced decks. My beautiful historic decks, most of them are, tucked away. And when I need to do a reading quickly, or if I have a marathon day of reading, I'll just grab a reliable deck that's mass-produced more than likely. I do grab sometimes my Los Scarabeo. I'll sometimes grab my Artisan Tarot decks because they're divine shufflers, that kind of thing. So you don't have to necessarily have really expensive decks in order to do this video challenge. Number one question is, are there any types of readings you won't do, and why not? Question two, is there any tarot card that you identify with the most? It doesn't necessarily have to be a triumph card. It could be a pip card. 3, is there any reading that you've ever done that gave you the chills for good or bad? And it doesn't have to be chills, but just impressed you a lot. And don't get into specifics. Don't say it was for your friend or your husband or yourself or anything. You don't have to get specific about it. Just the outcome, perhaps. And number 4, which is your preferred system of tarot? Do you like pip style, which includes TDM or the early Italians? Do you prefer the Thoth? Do you prefer the Waite Colman Smith or Continental or other variety? There's a few varieties of tarot systems, right? And if you do have a preference, then why do you like it the best? And show us, in this case, you can show us an example of the tarot deck that exemplifies that system that you like the best. Number 5, do you prefer doing in-person readings or remote readings, and why? And you can also, if there's another method that I haven't thought of, like on the telephone kind of readings where you're connected but you're not in the same space, or hotline work, etc. Number 6, besides tarot, are there any other oracle systems that you really enjoy using? Which ones and why? And number 7, I figured 7 would be a good number. Not too long and still a nice number. What solidified your connection with tarot? So, getting back to number 1. Are there any kinds of readings you won't do? Why not? Well, for me, most people say I won't do health or I won't do medical. And that's a good rule of thumb. In fact, I prefer to steer away from those. However, if someone asks me if they're really ill and they really need help, Of course, I preface it by saying that, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a medical professional, but this reading will help you consider things, to help get you back on track until you can see your doctor. Always put something like that in. Or if it's imminent, then the person knows that they're going to pass away soon. And I've had, if you're in this long enough, you get questions like that. And I don't have the heart to say, I can't touch that, right? So I'll just do a reading. Well, I can't, tell you when you're going to die or anything like that. And I won't tell you when you're going to die. I don't know. I can't tell you that. But I can, do an interpretation of how to make yourself most comfortable, or for you to consider the things to sew up or tie up before you pass away. What are the things that you feel, would help you connect with the things and the people that you really need to connect with before passing. Or if you have a bucket list, something you really wanted to do, help guide you through, considering doing that kind of thing. But yeah, so I will help people in that regard, absolutely prefacing that I'm not a medical professional, and nothing that I say is in lieu of medical advice. But I don't have the heart to turn someone away if they just need some comfort, or especially if it's about their end days. But the one thing I really don't want to do, and I won't do, is help somebody commit a crime. And you'd be surprised the number of people who will ask how they can get away with something, and not like, no one's approached me about like the M word, thank God, but like they'll be like, how do I accomplish this, overnight, how do I accomplish something overnight, and it's like the only answer would be illegal. So I refuse to do those kinds of things. Question 2, is there any tarot card that you identify with the most? It doesn't necessarily have to be a triumph card. Well, in recent years, I think I definitely connect with the Hermit. And I'm just pulling a deck that happens to be on my desk, and that is the Tarot of Marseille, Golden Tarot of Marseille. I picked the Hermit because I've become him in a way. I'm old. I'll be in my second year of officially being a senior citizen this year. I'll be 66. I walk with a cane, most certainly. I keep to myself. I mind my own business. I try not to get involved with too many people. If people come to me, that's cool. I'm happy to help. And that's what a tarot reader does, right? People come to me. I don't go to them. I don't solicit that I do tarot readings. You find me, and that's the way it works with me. And so, and I'm decrepit to some degree. So I just sort of connect with him, and time passes. I'm extremely aware of the passage of time, and that kind of thing. So I identify, I think, mostly with the Hermit card. Is there any reading that you've ever done that gave you the chills for good or bad? And don't get into specifics. I don't want to betray anyone, in particular. Never betray a person, ever. Never discuss readings that you did for people and say, oh, guess what? I just did this reading and for so-and-so, and this is, oh, you wouldn't believe it. That's not cool. That's not cool. However, there have been a few readings where I was left thinking that something, I wouldn't necessarily say it. I would say be careful. If I saw any indicators that there could be danger, I would not say, oh, on the 2nd of June, be careful walking down the street. But I might phrase something like, just take care, just be careful of this or that, things that are not bad advice in general, without getting specific. But one was really a fun read when I was just doing tarot. I was proficient enough to feel like I could do it, and it was probably after a couple of years of doing it like quietly, on my own, when I went to college, and I did tarot readings for a handful of people. Even then, unless you were my roommate or a friend of my roommate, nobody really knew that I did this because I was just kind of secret about it. I guess I was a little insecure to some degree. At any rate, I did a reading for someone, and it was, of course, like superficial question, like about boyfriend or whatever, the fella she was dating. And I said she was going to end up with this guy. And of course, like 2 weeks later, they broke up. So, there went that, credibility until about 20 years ago. I was still married to my first husband. I went to a college reunion. She recognized me. She approached me and she said, "You told me I was going to end up with him." Well, guess what? Years went by and we reconnected. We both got married and divorced from other people, and we reconnected and we ended up together. And that really helped with my credibility. I think it was just a really wonderful coincidence and a happy accident, because at that time when I did the readings, when I was like 18, 19, I don't think that I was particularly proficient enough to, I don't know, maybe, I don't know. But I don't even remember doing the reading, so I can't speak on how connected I felt at that time. But I thought that was a really fun one to have under my belt. Which is your preferred system of tarot? Pip style includes TDM, Italian decks, etc. Thoth, Waite Colman Smith, Continental, or any other style. Why do you like it best? Show an example. Well, there's no question. Anybody who follows my channel knows that I like the Pip style decks. I prefer the Italian. However, the TDM, I have plenty of TDM decks. And I have plenty of modern decks that are Pip style also. I can show you an example of each of what I'm talking about. Here's an example of a very easy to purchase, not too expensive tarot deck that represents my preference for Italian decks. This one is the Ancient Italian Tarot by Lo Scarabeo. And you can see that it's not at all crude. It's kind of a sophisticated design and method of printing. It's beautiful and I love it. Another example of, say, French that I like, I do like the Dodal. I think the Dodal's a lot of fun. Oh, there's my cuckoo clock. Here's a Jean Dodal by Artisan Tarot. They have a fine copy of the Dodal. It's not in order, but it's an example of TDM. So I enjoy TDM. And certain TDM decks I really like a lot, and I like the Dodal a lot. And then here's an example of a modern day tarot deck. Well, modern, it's already 50 years old, but modern-ish, right? And I've showed this before in a recent video, as a matter of fact, and that is the Fergus Hall Tarot of the Witches, originally known as the 007 Tarot deck. It's a Pip style deck. And, it doesn't have to be TDM or Italian for me to like it. I just like Pip styles. Now, why do I like the Pip style decks? I like the Pip style decks because they came originally without the encumbrance of the intent of tarot reading. They were created as a game. So the cards were representative of concepts, right? And people who played the game ranked those concepts and gave them value, and that's how you played them in the game. And then, of course, you have the pips. And so I like Pip style decks because the historic decks are pre-occultists and before the occultists put their spin on things. Now, that's not to say that when I don't have words that I associate with the Fool or the Betelgeuse or the El Bagato rather in the Italian deck and La Papessa. Of course, I make associations. That's how I came to understand how I have a relationship with the cards, right? My understanding of the cards for me was to get the origin story, because when you understand something at its root, you have a full understanding of it. And it's like being able to paint really well before you go into the abstract, right? So you have to understand something fundamentally before you master it and go your way. If you only ever have a superficial understanding of something, it'll remain superficial. And I do like the Italians for that reason, because they had meaning. And I enjoy the idea of people playing cards in 1450 or 1500, and then after the game, whoever lost or whoever won, or anybody in the game rather, if in an example, could make a poem or a little story up based on the cards that were left behind. I think I read somewhere that that's what they did. Either the winner or the loser or somebody or whatever cards were left on the table after the game was over. To complete the game, they would have fun by just saying a little story about what was their fate. It was just fun. Wasn't necessarily divination, but it was just fun. And I get a kick out of that. Same with TDM. I mean, the occultists came later and decided that they had to correct the TDM because these early TDMs, maybe they felt missed the point of certain, esoteric clues or whatever. But it was still a card game, and I like that. And then with the this modern day pip, I mean it's got a feel for sure. It's got its own feel, but it's still unencumbered by the occultists' impositions of putting meanings that don't have anything to do with the history or the origin stories. So I just like origin. I like going back to understand where something comes from, and that's how I teach. If you understand something at its cellular level, you get it. Okay. Do you prefer doing in-person readings or remote readings, and why? And on the telephone or hotline work or whatever. I hate being on the telephone. I just do not enjoy being on the telephone. I don't care who it is. If my children talk, I'll always answer the phone for the people in my life that really, really matter. I'm never not going to answer the phone. But, and if somebody needs me, I'll be there for them, right? But I'm not going to sit on the phone for 2 hours doing a tarot reading because it's just not who I am. I prefer to have control of that. And I do the reading, which is why I really like to do remote readings, because I do the reading, I tie it up, I send it, right? And I always open to discussion, always open to somebody, contacting me after they receive it and ask for clarification. In fact, in my readings, I'll say, if you need clarification, if you were here present with me, we'd have a conversation, no doubt. So feel free to converse with me. But I generally prefer to do the message, receive the message, send the message, and rather than feel like I'm held hostage, because you know how that could be. Somebody might pay for a half an hour, and they don't think anything of keeping you for an hour and a half. And even my 13 card spread, I could wrap that up in a half an hour or less for sure. You can really get into in-depth for sure. I mean, it's not like you can't get a lot of information, but to answer a question for a person, you could do that pretty well without spending a day and a half. And so I prefer to do remote readings. In the older days, of course, before the internet, I was doing in-person readings, and people were coming into my home, and I'm the kind of person, I don't like people in my home. I don't like strangers in my home. Family, close friends, everyone, you're welcome to be in my home, of course. But I don't, when there's repairmen that are coming, they have to come on a day my husband's here, because I just don't like dealing with strangers in my home. And I must have been one of the first remote readers with the, as soon as I recognized the internet and the potential for what I did, that was it. So I've been doing remote readings since the second I had a computer that had, remote capabilities. And that was the no turning back. And if you believe you can have a connection with another human being, I mean, think about it. If you love somebody who lives in another place, and don't you feel connected to them, right? Sometimes you have a special connection with people, and those feelings like when, I better call so-and-so, I have a feeling, those are the kind of invisible thread connections that I always feel. And when someone contacts me and I want to have a discourse with them, either through email or they send me a little video or something like that, and we converse, in bites, and I get an understanding of what it is they need, and then I do my reading that way. But I definitely am the queen of remote read. Number 5. Oh, that was number 5. And I will sometimes do hotline work. Now, I haven't done it lately, but sometimes I will. And, again, I like just doing a video and sending it to hearing the question, doing a video and sending it out. Number 6, besides tarot, are there any other oracle systems that you enjoy? Which ones and why? Well, I think the very first oracle system that I ever used, and I didn't even know what it was. I was so young. I was just a little girl. I wasn't even 10 years old. And I discovered that when I was in bed and I was looking, my bed in those days was up against the wall, that if I looked at the wall, I saw movies on the wall. I called them watching movies on the wall, and I didn't know other people couldn't do it. I thought anybody could do it. And I would just go to bed, and before I would drift off, I would watch the movies on the wall, and I would see people in the neighborhood doing things, or my own family, or I just thought it was normal. And then one time we went down the shore, and there was a bunch of us and kids that were cousins or relatives, and we all were sort of just thrown in a room together, and I was sharing a bed with a little girl I never knew before, and I was telling her about the movies on the wall. Could she see it? She thought it was crazy. And then I realized that people just can't see the movies on the wall. And now I still really enjoy scrying, and I'll show you what I use now. I use this beautiful black obsidian sphere. I guess, I don't know how many inches wide it is, but it's a bit. I guess it's about 8 or 10 inches. And it's beautiful. And how I do it is I just put, a little light source, usually a battery-operated candle, because I don't want to start fires, and I tend to be forgetful. But it's all I need in a dark room, and I'll have two, one candle on either side, and then I'll watch my movies in the crystal ball. I like it to be black. When I went on vacation with my children, I just brought a little black bowl, and I filled it with water, and I still had my little tea light candles on either side. And I don't do it as often as I use tarot. I use tarot the most, but I do like scrying. I've also demonstrated spirit dice from time to time. But I prefer the visual, and I've had some really crazy results with this. I did one not too long ago on the young people that were killed in Idaho, and I got some chilling responses on that. And I didn't make it public, but wild results. And I've had fun messages like from my mom, and telling me things that I knew it was my mom, that kind of thing. But for the most part, I prefer visual. So I go for the tarot, and I go for the scrying. And the last thing, number 7, what solidified your connection to tarot? Now, most people know my story, that the first time I saw tarot, and I just did it not too long ago. I mentioned, that I saw it on the Dark Shadows show, that they time traveled a lot of times, and they had lots of different stories. And one of them, they were back in time, and they had the one J.J. Swiss, which I think was still later than the time period that they were in, but who knew the difference? I was only 10 years old. And that kind of thing. And that's like the superficial answer. I'm deeply connected to the artwork. I think I responded because I thought they were magically mystical and stuff like that. But as the years went on, I realized that for me, tarot became a way of honing in messages. Like I mentioned, when I was a child, and I would just look on the wall, and I would see movies on the wall. I would see things happening projected on the wall, and it was as real as watching a movie. I mean, I didn't know any better. And I would receive, or I don't know if it's calling receiving messages, but I would see things, I would see things in our house. We were the first owners of the house. My parents had the house built by my grandfather. but it was on virgin land, and I was convinced. I would tell my parents that we were buried. Our house was on top of a cemetery, and I told them that. I kept saying that the people who were buried under the house were coming to see. Parents thought I was crazy, and maybe I was. I don't know. But as it turned out, years later, I mean, we just in doing like historic. Looking up stories about where I grew up, I realized that all that land was owned by, aside from having, Native Americans there. Then William Penn came, and that land was all owned by Penn, and, some of it was cemetery land, and so it just, and when I would go to places, if I went to historic places, I would get chills. And I still do. I mean, I can walk into a space and tell, I think I won't go in there. When I lived briefly in Montana, there were a few places that I went on tours and I wouldn't go in the room. I wouldn't go in the building. I'd say, no, I'm not going in there. And when the person that I went with came out, said, oh man, there was a gallows in there and people were hung. And, it's like, yeah, kind of like I knew. I didn't want to go in there because I didn't know what I was going to see or feel, So I think getting back to why I connect with tarot is because I discovered that tarot was a way of the messages coming through me without interrupting my life, and without being like a crazy person. And so now I might get feelings, I might, get a sense that, I'm going to stay away from that spot or something like that. But I don't get visitations as much. I pick up on stuff. It's not like I don't. But the tarot, the visual helps me. It helps control the abruptness of things thinking that they can just pop in, And my connection to the universe is such that this is how you channel it for me, this is how it comes in, And so I just became attached to the cards because it eliminated all the noise and all the other stuff that would come to me without my invitation. I hope that made sense. And so if I'm looking for an answer, then I'll use the cards to help visualize the answer. And I think too, the older you get, if you don't, I had to create that discipline for myself, where it's just, I had to put like a little barrier. I had to put up a distancing. I had to put up some barriers, and I can receive messages, but it's on my terms, and I've been able to do that. So those are my 7 questions. And I didn't really need to have too many tarot decks, and so you don't need to have too many tarot decks either. It's just more interesting to hear your stories. And I hope this has been fun for you. Oh, I got to give it a name. Well, when I think of the name, I'll put it in the title, and then you could call it a video challenge, whatever it's called, by Marilyn from Tarot Clarity. And I hope you do it. I hope you enjoy it. Until next time, friends, peace, stay well, be kind, and do no harm.